To resize a frame in Photo Fusion, you simply click on it, mouse down on these blue resize handles, and drag. You'll notice that as you drag, you see these blue overlays which give you a sense of the size of the image. If you need to set a specific and carefully determined size, then the way to do it is by clicking here on the border. Normally you would drag this to adjust the border thickness, but when you click, you get access to things like the X and the Y position of the frame, as well as the width and height. You can drag the width directly, like this, or you can click on this control and then type a number, for example 4 by, let's say, 5 inches, to get an exact size. You'll notice that as you drag frames around, you get these white ticks called snappers in the ruler moving around. They give you a sense of how big the frame is, and they're called snappers because you'll see that the frames magnetically jump and snap to one another as you move close to having two frames touch. If you take the snapper and drag it, you'll realize that you can adjust any frames that are touching one another as a single unit. And what's nice about that is when you have a complex layout, here I've got an auto collage on page 2 which has a bunch of intersections between frames, and I could sit here, select frames and resize them like this, but that would be fairly slow, and it's much faster for me to simply grab the snapper and move the entire collage around as a unit. Much faster to do these bulk sort of power tool operations than to do it all manually. Although of course you can. If you decide you want to do this sort of edit, then go right ahead. You can select the frames and move them independently. So other ways of resizing frames, while you've got the frame being dragged like this, if you were to hold the Shift key down, you'll see that it kind of magnifies the mouse movement so that the frame can be adjusted with much more precision. You can also hold the Alt key down and then you will be resizing from the center. Everything is multi-selection friendly. If I were to press the mouse button and drag out a rectangle like this, I've now got both frames selected, and if I were to resize, I'll be resizing both of them, and if I hold the Alt key, I'll be resizing both of them from the center, that kind of thing. You'll frequently want to have multiple frames that are exactly the same size. There are several ways to do that. The simplest way, of course, is to just start off with 2 frames that are the same size. I did this by clicking the Add Frame button, and what I got, of course, were 2 identically sized frames, and I can select them and resize both of them just by selecting and then dragging like this. But there are other ways to do it, and I'm just going to take a moment to show how. Personally, what I do is I drag out a new frame by holding the F key down and then dragging like that, and then I split it. I move the mouse over this control here, I press the mouse button down and drag, and if I continue dragging out to the right, you'll see that I can create a large number of splits in any direction that I like. So this is a simple way to get 3 frames lined up that are exactly the same size. That's another way to do it. Another way would be to have an image which you want to be the master size, and then duplicate it by pressing Ctrl D as many times as you like. Again, it's easy to snap them into alignment, for example like this, and then if you need to select all 3 and size them. And of course you can use the direct numeric entry by clicking on this and typing, for example, 3 by 2 inches exactly, and you'll see that I'm setting the size on all 3 frames at the same time. You'll notice that I said 3 by 2 inches, yet if we zoom in very close up here, we see that the ruler tells us the image is snapping at 3, but if you're really precise about it, the image has been inset a little bit. We do that because when you have an auto collage, it's nice to see some space. I'll just very quickly create an auto collage out of these 3 images, and you'll see that there's room to see the background. Let me just place let's say a paper into the background so that you can see it. So the frames have clearly been inset. This frame thinks it's 5 inches wide because it's half of the canvas, but there's room on it. That's because we have an inset, and the inset is something that you can control easily. When you drag on the border control, you're going to set the border thickness, and you can set it down to 0. And I'm going to set the border for everything down to 0 so that you can easily see where the pictures end. Now, the inset is set to something other than 0, and the fastest way to move it is to hold the Control key down and drag on the border. If you drag to the right, you increase the inset. If you drag to the left, you decrease it, and you can decrease it all the way down to 0. So these images now are touching one another, and they really are exactly the dimensions that they say they are. We find that most of the time it's nice to have a little bit of room between the pictures, and I would just do that by increasing the inset, again just by control dragging the border, and then I'll turn a little bit of border back onto these pictures by dragging the border directly.